My name's Marcia, Shadle Cusic, and I'm a Sister of Mercy associate. I became an associate almost 10 years ago, and so I support the missions of the Sisters of Mercy as best as I can. That is a question I often wonder: how can the associates ever do everything that the Sisters of Mercy have done for the world? As an associate, I embrace the charisms of the Sisters of Mercy, their critical concerns, and probably would talk a little bit more about the critical concerns. For me, probably immigration and women are the two major critical concerns that have drawn me in to work with the sisters and continue to promote their ideas regarding immigration and the influence and importance of women in society. I'd also tell them that the sisters that I've known in my life are just incredible women who are just amazing in terms of their generosity and their willingness to go where they are needed to serve others. I think, again, it's their, the symbolism here at College St. Mary with the walking woman, and Catherine Macaulay saw people in need around her in Ireland, and in particular women, and so we are here centuries later, and women still are not always considered equal to men. And I think, at least I learned from the Sisters of Mercy, the importance of generosity of spirit and promotion of equality with all people, no matter what their immigration status is, no matter what their sex is. So I've just seen so many Sisters of Mercy just share that idea and really love of people. The other thing I think I always have noticed about the Sisters of Mercy is their ability to be lighthearted too. They always can find something to laugh about or find some joy to point out. And probably some of the wisest women I know on the planet are Sisters of Mercy. My first encounter actually was years ago with a Sister Evangeline who was working at St. James Orphanage, and I had a sister who was interested in working with special needs kids, and somehow my mom knew about her, and so we met Sister Evangeline. And so she was the first sister, and she continued to be in my life up until her death. Then I did decide to come to College of St. Mary, so I graduated from College of St. Mary. And I am impressed with what I see is happening around College of St. Mary now, because to be honest, it wasn't until my three daughters went to Mercy High School that I really understood who the Sisters of Mercy were and their charisms and their influence on the world. Well, I do think it's that idea of accepting people where they're at, loving people where they're at, and trying to figure out, and I think this is what I love about the Sisters of Mercy, trying to figure out what do these people need and how can I serve them? How can I improve their life so that they have fullness of life and can use the gifts and talents that they've been given, and acknowledging that in other people. So I that's what I've seen in all the Sisters of Mercy that I've had the privilege to know. And that is a challenge that I reflect on and talk to my fellow associates about. How do we do that? To replicate the sisters, we can't, because we're not religious sisters ourselves. So what do we do to continue to educate people about what the Sisters of Mercy have done? I think some of the things, and again, kudos to College St. Mary, the whole history walls that I have seen now placed up here so the student can walk past and see the history and know a little bit about some of who the religious leaders were of this institution. I think that presence is going to be important. I think at some point the associates need to be present to the students, either maybe in large activities or small group activities, to talk about why we were drawn to be associates and see if they maybe are like-minded and would also like to continue being a Mercy associate and trying to influence the world in ways that we can as lay women. Well, Catherine McCauley, I'm in awe. I mean, how does a woman in her time frame who inherits quite a bit of money decide to do what she did? I mean, I think that's amazing to me, that she comes to have all this money, and instead of using it for herself, for self-pleasure, she serves the poor, and particularly women and children. And so much like the Sisters of Mercy today, works to give them workable skills so that they can support themselves. I mean, her notion wasn't that I'm going to support these women the rest of my life. It was to engage these women into some kind of occupation, whether it be a seamstress or a marketer, something so that they could support themselves and they could support their children. I guess I don't know of any woman that's doing that today to that extent. I think the environment, certainly Francis talked about the environment. I think probably we need to do more in the Catholic Church, but sometimes I look at the critical concerns and I think, I don't know, other than in my personal life, what I can do to support, violence. Again, I write letters, I call congressmen about outrageous gun control in the United States. But I think what I've learned recently about the critical concern of violence and so forth is even the importance of language. And Sister Catherine Cooper has a beautiful group that she runs that when she started talking about that in relationship to violence, I thought, there's another Sister of Mercy bringing it down to something that I can embrace and be conscientious of and try to use language that it does not come across as even violent or hurtful or sarcastic or something along that line. Well, and again, I think all three of my daughters, as they say at Mercy High School, they came in as Mercy girls and they leave as women of Mercy. And all three of my daughters embrace the Mercy lifestyle, the Mercy values, the Mercy charisms. It's been delightful for me because we know so many of the Sisters of Mercy that are still here and that we interact with. And certainly my daughter, who teaches occupational therapy here, understands the importance of women, again, being able to provide for themselves, being leaders, women having a voice. And I say kudos to her because I know she's shared with me many times her opportunity that she gives to her students to say, how else could you do this? What else might you be thinking about? Empowering her students to think for themselves and not just follow whatever's in the textbooks or tradition. Sister Evangeline, who started Madonna School for the people that live in Omaha, for special needs kids. Sister Evangeline also then came into my husband's life because she needed a PE teacher. My husband taught PE for her just gratis, no pay or anything. And again, she'd been to our house many times for dinner, and always full of wisdom. Sister Macaulay, and that was her chosen name, taught history here, and she was a genius. She approached me when I was here actually teaching also at College St. Mary, to teach a course with her during the summer. We titled it Women's Ways of Knowing. And I told her after we got done teaching the course together, Sister, I wasn't really the teacher. I was a student the whole time. And she again, just a spark of joy and happiness. And whenever I would leave her house, when I'd go over and visit, she'd always have her common greeting, see you in the funny pages, as her final words to me as I left. But again, just, I've never met someone so intelligent as Sister Macaulay. Sister McTild, when I was a student here in 1975, we had a massive tornado in Omaha, and we just laughed. The National Guard was flying around, and of course, as students, we were outside because there was a bank had been blown apart, and so there was money in the trees, and so we were having a gale time trying to get up in the tree to get the money. And Sister comes running out at us, and she's got curlers in her hair. We'd never seen her without a veil, and tells us to get back inside and so forth. And as we're going inside, she too started laughing with us, and she's, yeah, that's quite a sight out there, isn't it? So Sister Christelle, again, could tell stories, unbelievable. Sister Johanna Burnell, who was the president at Mercy when my daughters were there. Again, I had so many life questions that I would sit and talk with her about. Why does this happen? Can you explain this? How do people know? And she just was probably one of the wisest women. I dearly miss her. She died recently, and it was very hard on me. Well, that's an interesting, particularly with some of my recent conversations with the Mercies. How did you know you were called to be a sister? And I'm just fascinated that all of them just knew. They just knew this was their calling. Because as I told Sister Johanna, I don't know if I never really felt called that I know of to do anything in particular in my life. And so that, led to kind of an openness in terms of, what is God's plan for you? I had many of those kinds of conversations to try to discern that, and again, at the end of my conversation with all the sisters, and I've asked this question to many of the sisters, how did you know you were called? It was empowering, and always with trust. Just trust that God has guided your life in the way that was meant to be, and even if you felt like maybe you didn't turn the way God, He still works with you, and just the lovingness of God. And I think that has kind of empowered me in terms of being okay with the life decisions I've made, and as long as it's to improve or help other people, it's okay. Well, I feel kind of privileged because it has given me an opportunity to get to know some of the other sisters who I did not encounter here at College St. Mary or at Mercy High School. And our life, our ambition is to do service, and that speaks to me, I guess probably even genetically, because my mom was very service-oriented, my sisters are. But it gives me an opportunity to share in a community of like-minded women. I love the fact that we begin and end all our meetings with prayer to remind us, to trust that God is watching over us, even though in these days it's difficult to I guess always trust that because of the situation of cruelty that I see being imparted on people. But I have to trust, and I think that's an interesting, I keep using the word trust. When I visited the House of Mercy in Ireland, there were tiles from the roof that they were selling, and you could purchased them, and the one I purchased just says trust on it, from Catherine McCauley's house. And I think being with people like that kind of inspire you and help you continue to trust and go forward and try to make the world a better place. It doesn't feel heavy, the responsibility to be an associate and carry on the ways of the Sister of Mercy. It doesn't feel heavy. But I do question how best to do it. And, when I've asked some of the sisters how best to do it, how best we can carry on the charisms of the Sisters of Mercy, they just always come back with, Marcia, you just be who you are, do what you feel called to do, and you will carry on the charisms. I mean, it's always an empowering message, and again, I just have to trust that that's the way to go about it. And I've talked to some of the sisters about how do I communicate how to make the world a better place, and they would do it the same way they always done it, just in relationships with people, in loving people and not trying to bulldoze people over, but walking with people. Well, to me, I have to stop and look at the walking woman symbol every time I come in to the College St. Mary and before I come into the chapel, because it represents so much of what I have seen in my life with the women that I have known. It represents Catherine McCauley, who decided, rather than being an order, a contemplative order, which is basically, prayer, not that they didn't go out, but it was mainly prayer. Catherine McCauley was very much walking through the streets of Dublin and noticing people that were suffering and offering assistance and walking with them, not overpowering them. And that's what the Sisters of Mercy have done with schools and hospitals, social service. They continue to walk among the people with the institutions that they've built and the inspiration that they've given people like me to continue to walk amongst the people, discern or try to determine what their needs are, and then support them as best you can. I would say in the classroom, continue to encourage the students to have a voice, to take a chance, to give an answer in terms of what their thoughts are, even if it's not in the textbook or it isn't something that they've ever heard before. I mean, that's to be creative in that sense, to speak your voice. I think as an institution, I'd love to see this college be more active in the community. I know at a recent Mercy Associate meeting, we talked about potentially doing kind of not a march necessarily, but a peace prayer on campus and invite members of the community to come and have speakers about the importance, of peace and the violence that does happen across the world. So I think I'd like to see this college be more visible to the community. That I think I'd like. But again, it'll have to come from the students here who are empowered and who feel they have a voice and the ability to lead and make change. Well, I think it does help to know some of the history and maybe specifics, and you can start with Catherine McCauley, who had choices to make, and her history and the choices that she did make and why she potentially made those choices. I think that can resonate with students. And then I think you can talk about, again, Sister Evangeline. There wasn't any special needs school here in Omaha. Why was she gravitated? I mean, why did she gravitate to that? Why did she do what she did? And, you know, just near the campus now is a great big extension of Madonna's school. And so you can see how a woman's decision to lead in a new way has affected the community, and I would say in positive ways. So the same thing, and I think you could take any example of a sister, you know, from Sister Ward, who comes to the United States. Why did they decide to leave Europe and come here and even start the whole Sisters of Mercy movement, and then the hospitals and the schools that the sisters, I mean, that took a lot of effort, and it took a lot of determination and commitment. And I think each one of these students needs to decide, what is my determination? What is my commitment? What am I drawn to, and how am I going to influence change in a way that helps all humanity? Well, and I know there are some men enrolled, I think primarily in the graduate programs, but what drew me to College of St. Mary was that it was an all-women's college, that I wanted to experience for myself, what does that mean to have women in leadership on campus? You know, when I was here, the president was a Sister of Mercy. Department heads, many of them were Sisters of Mercy. So they were all women. And I was curious in terms of how might that be from, you know, the experience I've had with you know, men in my classes, or boys at that time, I guess, in my classes. And again, I was just kind of overwhelmed and empowered, I think, by what I saw as examples and conversations I saw, and the fact that, and again, I'm a product of the 70s, so even the thought of getting an advanced degree, yeah, that was capable. I'm not sure, you know, 10 years earlier if that would have been something that I would have seen as a possibility. And then, of course, my children have even more advanced degrees than I have, because I think, and probably women across the United States have gotten, I mean, obviously we know with the women's movement and so forth, but yeah, I think I would come here not only for a great education, but if I wanted to see role models every day that were primarily women and how they led and treated people. Well, I remember thinking about this a couple years after I had graduated, because so I had been here at College St. Mary, and of course, you know, who led the student senate, you know, who was playing the sports, it was all women, you know, who was leading liturgy, it was always women. So I felt very comfortable really being in any kind of leadership role. A couple years after I got out and I was working in healthcare, I looked around and I thought, ooh, something's wrong here. All the leadership positions are filled with men. And that was kind of frustrating for me, because I thought that women could do those jobs. Why are there always just men in charge of those positions? And I'll be honest, even up until when I retired and I worked in, again, healthcare, I still saw men primarily in major, you know, who's the head of the hospital, who's the head of the department. I still saw men. And so I think women have a long ways to go yet in this country to really be on an equal footing with men, and in terms of opportunities available to them. I still think there's a real sense of looking at women, and I hate to use this term, but second-class citizens, not as good as. Certainly women have achieved a lot, but I would not say today women are seen as equals with men in terms of opportunities and responsibilities and empowerment. Well, the same thing that happened to me, I think, just that, yes, I should be interviewed for that job. Yes, I should apply for that job. Yes, I can do that job. And then I think women just have to fight in the mix with those people who continue to still dominate, I think, the power positions in this country, and probably, as I've heard, probably work twice as hard to prove that they are as capable of being a CEO or a president or department chair or whatever it is. Well, again, I go back to Catherine McCauley. She saw the need to educate women. Now, in the time that she lived, it was to give them a skill set, to educate them how to earn money on their own. And so I think that just continues to go through the College St. Mary, and certainly you look at the number of schools that the Sisters of Mercy across the nation have started, and again, boy, the contribution to society that the Sisters of Mercy have given, both schools and hospitals, colleges, universities, is amazing. And again, their commitment to that, and certainly the struggles they must have had just financially to build a building like this, or buy the land, and they did that on their own. Certainly they had donors who they had influenced, I think, in many ways. I know I try to generously give to the Mercy institutions because I know what good they bring to the world. So again, from Catherine McCauley, I think the Sisters of Mercy have been committed to educating men and women, but primarily women, again, following in their legacy. Well, you've heard the phrase, practice what you preach. I mean, she was out in the streets. She didn't just, write the check and then walk away from it and say good luck. She was in there working with her fellow sisters, and obviously she started the Sisters of Mercy as a religious order, which again wasn't what the bishop at the time, the man at the time, thought, but she wanted her own religious organization because he suggested that she just join another already existing religious organization. So again, she came up with what her heart was telling her to do, and she followed it. And she wouldn't take no for an answer. And I guarantee the Sisters of Mercy I've worked with will not take no for an answer. But you watch them in action. And so, again, when you see somebody ministering to the poor, to the sick in the hospital, or to a kid who's having trouble with school or at home or something, and you see her, the Sister of Mercy, caring and again loving this person and walking with them to improve their life, not the life that the sister thinks they should have, but what this child or this person who's in a hospital thinks. So, yeah, I think you're influenced by that, and you want to, if you're drawn to that kind of humility and care for people, you want to support a continuation of that. So you either jump in and start working side by side like the sisters, or you give them finances so that they can improve what they're already doing. Well, I think a continuation of empowering women to tell every student who graduates from here, you're capable, you have the gifts, you have the talents, now go out and lead the world. Again, as I said earlier, for this institution, I would love to see them more visible in the community. So sponsoring community events, potentially on campus, bringing some attention to the College of St. Mary and again, the foundress, the Sisters of Mercy, and again, the messages from some of the graduates who people will recognize as leaders in the community or even within the nation, that women who have graduated from this institution and have gone on to maybe start some schools or again, maybe politically have achieved some kind of status to speak again to a larger community about the education available here at this institution. Well, I'll go back to Catherine McCauley. Notice, pay attention. What do you see? If it's something that just doesn't feel right or feels like it could be improved, then investigate it. How can I make this institution better? How can I make this person's life better? What's not available that should be available to this person, irregardless of their status? So I think that's what I would say. You got to pay attention to what's going on around you. It's not just about, earning a living and living in a great house and, and having 2 dogs and a cat and, whatever it is that you think you want. But I think you have to pay attention to what is happening in the lives of other people.